I'd like to bring up our next exciting panel, From Hesitation to Integration, Building a Culture of Innovation in Energy Inspections.
Hey everyone, welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. So thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it. Today we're talking about culture and adoption. Obviously the title of the panel, From Hesitation to Integration, Building a Culture of Innovation in Energy Inspections. My name is Zach Dukowitz. I'm moderating today. I started my career in the drone industry back in 2016 for UAV Coach. I was doing writing and reporting. Went on to work at Flyability in communications, helped launch the Ineos 3, and now I'm working for MFE Inspection Solutions as an Inspection Insights Analyst. So just a quick intro, and then we'll get into it. I was lucky enough about a month ago at AUVSI Exponential to do a panel with the first 4 folks here. Everyone except Marty from Dow, unfortunately, wasn't with us, but that panel, we talked a lot about implementation, how folks are actually using robotics in the field, and focused on oil and gas. That's the field that all these folks work in. And that panel, we talked use cases, benefits of robotics for remote data collection, all those benefits we know, ROI, enhanced safety, reduced downtimes, all these things that I think if you're in the room, you're pretty familiar with. We touched on culture, how do you get people to embrace innovation at your company, and we touched on adoption. So you've decided you want to use robotics. Well, do you buy them? Do you do training internally? Do you outsource? Do you go some hybrid route? We only did a little bit on those 2 topics, culture and adoption. At the end, during the Q&A, a woman raised her hand and said, hey, I really want to do this. I'm on board, but I'm having trouble with buy-in at my company. Everyone just wants to keep doing things the same way, and I'm feeling lost. Like, I really want to do this, but I don't know where to get started. So we realized we could have gone a lot deeper on culture and adoption. So out of that came this panel and this conversation. We're really excited to get into it. We have a panel of experts who've been working using robotics and advanced NDE tools for a long time, and they have a lot of experience to share. So to kick things off, we're going to just do brief intros, and then we'll get into the conversation. So we'll just go down the line. So Cortland, if you can introduce yourself.
My name's Cortland Penk. I'm the president of Osprey Integrity Limited, a drone service provider that covers North America. And we've been in the space for about just going on 8 years now, just shy of 8 years.
I'm Matthew Thrasher. I currently work for Occidental Petroleum. I've been working with drones since about 2017. Had the opportunity to work with drones and robotics all over the world in a lot of different aspects.
John McLean with Pemex Deer Park, previously with Shell. We started our program at Shell shortly after Part 107 went into effect, so back to the same thing, 2017, about 8 years. We do any type of inspections at height, leak response, tank inspections, and big part of the emergency response group.
Hi everyone, I'm Casey Collinsworth. I'm the Advanced NDE Inspection Specialist at Ineos Chocolate Bayou facility. I've been with Ineos for about 2 years, and before that I was in another inspection company for 3 years.
Hi, Marty Robinson. I work at Dow Chemical. I've been doing robotics specifically for 10 years now at that site, and globally even, and everything from the initial implementation of the program all the way through developing internal and external developed products. So.
Thanks, you guys. So the things we're definitely going to cover today, and then there's things that as time allows, the things we're definitely going to cover, looking at challenges when it comes to implementing robotics. We're going to go pretty deep on challenges. We're going to look at challenges when you're just getting started, as well as challenges these folks face even though they have established programs. And then we're going to go into solutions, which will arise pretty organically from those challenges. And then we're going to talk sort of brass tacks advice. We have a slide with advice. When it comes up, feel free to take pictures, of course. That's why we made it. And then we'll talk about adoption, internal, external. You know, do you buy your own equipment? Do you build a program? Do you outsource? So those are the 3 things we're definitely going to talk about. And then after that, if we can get more granular, we might get into how to organize your drone program and detail things like that. So let's go ahead and start out with challenges. And John, I'm going to pick on you first. John has a really interesting story when it comes to company culture. So as he mentioned, he was working for Shell. There was an amazing company culture when it comes to innovation. And then Shell divested from the site where he worked, and the company that came in was kind of the polar opposite. So John, I was going to ask you if you could start describing the culture at Shell and how that culture came about and what it enabled, and then talk about the culture where you are now and how you're working through that.
Yeah, so of course with Shell, you have the support of Shell Aviation Aircraft, Shell Emerging Technologies, which is based here in Houston. Corporate world, we have 7 refineries across the U.S. I went to every single one of them, helped them stand up their drone programs as part of the America's Emergency Response Team. So when there was the spill in the Mississippi River, I would travel from Deer Park to there and support them with the drone. So drones were widely used throughout the company. Some discussions that I've heard over yesterday and today is, the use of AI and machine learning and good stuff like that. We had a program in effect where we had AI and ML inspecting our floating roof tanks, and we were doing that in like 2022. And now you hear Chevron, Dow, all the, oh yeah, hey, we're doing AI, and I was like, oh man, we used to be there a long time ago. So from going there to Pemex, we're now we're the only refinery in the U.S. They have 5 other refineries in Mexico, but going and having to knock on doors, having to do my use cases, having to talk to people when I hear a project coming and explain to them, hey, we have a very good program and we could be doing this for you. And 50% of the time I get, we have a drone program?
Rough, yeah. And you recently had the rug pulled out from under you. You thought you were getting Doc 3, and then it was like down to someone just signing the last form, and you didn't get it. Yeah, so it's been challenging. Yeah.
Yep, so for the last 2 years, I've been trying to move our program forward and to get into remote ops, drone in the box. I had finally got there. We have a big block turnaround coming up towards the end of the year. I had big block, the turnaround manager and event manager approve 2 Doc 3s for me for use of the turnaround, and then turned back to the drone program once it was done. Said, go ahead and get with so-and-so, get the POs done. That evening, I was contacted by the vice president of HSSE and was asked, hey, is this a want or is this a need? And I was thinking very hard in the back of my mind, and finally came out, this is a want. And he goes, okay, do your business case and we'll think about it for next year.
Yeah, it's frustrating, and I'm sure this is familiar to some folks in the room. When you're trying to drive change, when you're trying to drive culture, you might get hit in the budget, or you might get hit with adoption issues. You might have the technology, you might have a drone program and no one's using it, or you might have other robotics as well. So Marty, I was going to bring you in. I know you told me an issue. You guys have a really established robotics program at Dow. What you might run into sometimes, though, is that there's an issue with people just not being comfortable pushing change in their specific work. So you gave me an example. The person who does data collection probably is doing it for someone else. So the person they're doing the data collection for is like their internal customer. So for them to say, hey, let's use a new tool, let's innovate, they're going to have to challenge that internal customer, and it's uncomfortable. And so they kind of just avoid the whole thing. If you could tell me about that dynamic.
I mean, it's human nature. You're going to take the path of least resistance, right? And if you've built a rapport, we use service providers for the data collection, and then our inspectors and stuff generally are Dow employees. And if they build that rapport with the inspector and the data collector, and trying to interrupt that, if you don't have buy-in from the inspector pushing back saying, hey, I want to collect it this way now with the robot or whatever, they're not always going to be, the collection person's not going to propose new ideas necessarily. So that culture, I mean, I think we've gone through a lot of that, getting the higher level inspectors and stuff on board to the programs and see the benefits from it. But yeah, it's culture, right? It's like building the culture. So you first have to build the confidence in the data. I mean, that's really important. So, what's always worked well for us is do the low-hanging fruit first, do the simple jobs that you could be successful at, and bring that data, show it's better, it's faster, it's more complete, whatever the benefit is, safer especially. And, then you can start throwing some of those more innovative ideas, in front of them. And sometimes we have one inspector that's completely on board. He's like, bring stuff to us and say, hey, can we try this? How do I bring this in? And that, that's the ideal situation, but that doesn't always happen. So I think it's just important to not promise the world and not deliver. I mean, that, that's an important thing. And, just it's something that people have been doing for a long time, and it might take a couple of trials, and if you can make it so it's not a burden to them, they're going to be a lot more receptive, and if it's adding complexity or adding cost to a project, that's always going to be an extra hurdle to get over.
Thanks, Marty. And Matthew, I was going to bring you in because I know you were telling me that there's just an awareness issue, and John also just touched on this, but you guys have a really established drone program, and people just sometimes don't even know about it. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We at Oxy, we have two separate sides of the company, the chemical side and the petroleum side. And on the petroleum side, we're very established. All of our business units know about the different types of inspections and things that we can do. And actually, this last week with OxyChem, they were trying to get into buying a drone that we already have. It's like, why are we, spending more money
Talk
on
to the drone program before
exactly.
you go out on your own. Yeah.
Exactly. So it really can be an awareness thing, making sure that all of your different business units and part of your company are aware of the technology that you already own.
Yeah. And John, you told me about another challenge that's sort of in this arena of awareness, and do people actually use the resources they have? But internally, you discovered someone was planning to hire a service provider to do a mapping project. And you're like, guys, I can do it. We have drones. We have mapping. I know this stuff. Tell us that story a little bit.
Yeah, so even with Shell, we started the project of doing the digital twin of the site, and it kind of got dropped for the first year while we were PEMEX, and then it got picked back up. And since I know a little bit about drones, I'm now the PEMEX Air Ops SME. So all Air Ops goes through me before it gets flown over the site. So I had a project come to me. They go, hey, we're going to use drones to do a 3D model of the site. And I'm like, why? I go, give me $70,000. I can buy the equipment, and I can do it for a lot cheaper than you hiring a third party. And it was just brushed off. I had to go back to them a couple times and say, hey, we can be doing this a lot cheaper than a third party. And it just gets brushed off. I finally got an email last week saying, hey, what type of drone do you have? Because of the third party wants to know. I'm like, we have the same drone that they have. Well, they might need you to help them, and supplement their work. I'm like, are you kidding me? Yeah. We could be doing this.
Right. So these are some challenges I think, again, might resonate for some folks in the room. There's another challenge Casey told me about, though, that I think is, well, it's good to know as you're starting, but it's a challenge that also could arise down the road. And Casey, I'm going to bring you in on the story you told me about. You have this commitment to inspect 1,000 circuits of piping. It probably comes out to like 5 miles of piping. And you were telling me that you had partnered with a crawler company that thought they could do it quite fast. And in fact, the engineers who built the crawler weren't quite clued into what it would actually do in the field, and it led to delays. And anyway, I'll let you go and tell the story.
Yeah. So just to kind of give you a little bit of background, so I have inspectors that are very. When I came on board, they were very hesitant to using advanced NDE or any robotics, drone solutions. So slowly, I've been able to kind of shift their mindset, and now they're coming to me, hey, Casey, what can we do for this to not remove the installation or do it while it's in service? So we've shifted that mindset at our company a lot. So now we have, this huge project, and we're hearing a lot of things, and we have, this whole CUI program going on, and we bring this company out, and essentially, I guess there's so much emerging technology that's coming out right now, and before the service providers bring it to their clients, or if they're bringing it to them in a developing stage, I think it's key to be transparent and say, hey, we're not there yet, but we're going to use your feedback to get there. So I think that was one of the obstacles that we ran into. Maybe they didn't understand how AI was doing their analysis or the technology, because it was really just a simple, probe that we all use. So it's nothing crazy, but I guess the reporting aspect of it, and then the way that the crawler, maneuvered throughout the pipes, and it had a tether, and it just wasn't, I guess, as efficient as we thought it was going to be, and there wasn't a lot of transparency. There wasn't a lot of boots on the ground, kind of, managing that project. So I say all this to say, if you do have hesitation from your company, or if you want to bring in, a new technology, and you've been able to shift that mindset a little bit, be very, very careful what you bring in, and make sure that you have a full-on proven concept pilot program before you, blast this to the media. Because some of the things that we do at my site is we have success stories. So it's essentially like internal marketing, right? So you just talk about all the projects that you've done in the last, quarter, and what success has it done. So if I were to bring that to our success story, that would shift our mindset completely back to, well, we've been doing it this way for so long, why would we change it? So I think making sure that, and maybe that was on me, I'll take full transparency, whatever, but if the service provider would have been transparent with me and said, hey, we're still in the developing phases, that would have really helped our success in the project. So, but everyone's fine, it was obvious. I was transparent with my company and said, hey, this is new technology, we don't know what this is going to be. It's a screening tool. Regardless of what it is, it's a screening tool. So just making sure that you have everyone comfortable with all the different situations, limitations, understanding the technology to your best capabilities is key to bringing in new technology, I think.
Like you said, you tried to set the expectation, but even then, the appearance outside of that could still be negative and affect everything. So yeah, you have to be careful.
Yes.
And that was something, Casey, you said when you told me the story related to what Marty just said, but you build your reputation. It could take you years, right, for people to start trusting you, and when Casey or Marty brings something in, it's going to work, it's going to perform, and we know it now. We didn't, at first, we were skeptical, but then you have something like this, and it can hurt that reputation. It would be a lot worse if it was your first time out, right, and you really invested your reputation in a technology that failed, and it was the first big sort of visible project at your company. So I think this is a lesson, hopefully learn through some pain and experience, that maybe others can avoid that pain by vetting your vendors. And I'll say, as someone who's worked on the hardware side, you might be surprised, and I'm not specifically talking about any given company, but companies, they need to make some amount of money to stay open, and they have investors breathing down their neck, and they might have engineers working not in the field at all, not asking folks in the field, building technology and not quite knowing how it's going to work when it gets out there. So it's important to really get in there and then say, hey, why don't we do a pilot program? It sounds like you guys aren't really ready fully to go to market, so why don't we test, and we'll give you data, we'll be partners on this. So yeah.
Yeah, and to Marty's point, even in your internal company, be transparent and don't overpromise and underdeliver.
Yeah,
That's key.
And I'm not trying to defend the other vendor or whatever, but they just don't know, like you said. They may just not know what's up on, and that's where it's important to work with the right companies and stuff too. Yeah. Use a service provider that you have a good relationship with, and maybe subcontract it or whatever, just so that you make sure that it's successful.
Absolutely, and that's what we did. And we did, there was different things that we did. It was a pilot program, so. But just, that part of bringing in new technology, making sure that you're comfortable before you blast it to the media, essentially, is very important.
I think what it comes down to is that it's very fickle, right? You sometimes only have one opportunity to make that first impression when there is just a general skepticism, to Marty's point, right? Path of least resistance until, things change. Business as usual until things change. But to kind of, I guess, endorse or encourage that change, you might only have that one shot to make that first right impression. So things like transparency, obviously some due diligence, and trying to explain things to the business units in a way that's either, yes, we've done that before, here's the white paper, back to Casey's point. No, we haven't done that before, but it sounds plausible, let's run a pilot project, like Zach said. Or no, the hardware's not there yet, but this is what's coming around the corner thanks to feedback. You go to your supplier and you find out that that's what's coming from the manufacturers. So doing that and building that trust is super imperative, because everybody in this industry has probably had a bad drone experience, a bad robotic experience. And when you go and you do that again, all you're doing is proving it's the same old, and things stay the same. So I think all of those tricks that everybody along the panel has talked about just kind of drive towards that. It's important that you make that first impression a lasting one when you're trying to talk within your own departments.
And I think it kind of falls in the trial versus pilot too, because everybody, budgets are tight or no budget at all. So it's hard to fund a true trial, or a true exploratory test. So a lot of times we try to put this on the back of actual job, right? An actual shutdown or turnaround, and hope that it delivers what we need. And like you say, try to set those expectations, because that's where we may have a budget to actually bring that resource in. But you have to be really careful with that and have to set those expectations. So.
Absolutely. And to your point, Cortland, I was able to build that confidence with my company, with me beforehand. So we had this, we have several companies come out and do lunch and learns. I'm sure you all guys have lunch and learns. And they were super excited about it. And I was like, they came out and did a demonstration like 18 months ago. We knew about this limitation. They've innovated since then. This is great. Let's do another demo. And then they exceeded our expectations there. But once it, came time to actually deliver results. But of course, everyone understood, right? It's emerging technology, and we're constantly having these conversations.
So even if you do a trial, when you're trying to bring in a third party, always be ready for embarrassment and damage control. So we brought in a company to do metal thickness testing. We had months of planning to get this drone to do one flight. Got the safety case done, reviewed their SOPs, again, brought in aviation. They met with aviation. We took them to the field. We did a practice run. Everything was great. We go to do a flare, about 260-foot flare. They were trying to get just the base of the flare tip. They were afraid it was being eaten from the inside. This drone operator went, he did one touch, beautiful, and he went back in, did a touch, and all of a sudden a big gust of wind came up, and the mechanical turbulence just sucked that drone in and crashed it into the flare tip and just wrapped it around the tip, and that's where it sat for 8 months. And of course, everyone that was out there turned and looked at me.
It's your fault. Yeah. So we're going to shift gears and start talking solutions, but I just want to ask if there's other challenges. Clearly that wasn't exhaustive. I think we covered a lot of challenges. If there's anything I'm missing or that we're missing at a high level, though, please, share.
I think one of the key factors in developing a drone program or bringing innovation is to continuously talk to your counterparts, talk to your colleagues. You're at lunch, in the cafeteria, whatever, talk to them. Do some internal marketing to show your program. So we have like a safety moment that we send out every week, and we're continuously on there. Brag about your success and, get everyone thinking the same way that you do.
Thanks, Casey. Real quick, the slides aren't showing up. If we could get what we're seeing here to show up here, possibly. Thank you. And also, I forgot to say thank you so much. We're going to do a Q&A. I forgot to say that, I think, when I did the intro. So the Q&A will be about 10 to 15 minutes. So if you have questions, we'll definitely get to them. So shifting gears and talking about solutions, we had a lot of conversations getting ready for this panel, some one-on-one, some as a group. And what struck me when it came to advice and things you could do to help drive innovation at your company, and also talk about adoption, like how do you go about actually implementing robotics, that there are two kind of groups. One was large initiatives, large visible projects and efforts you could do, and the other was just sort of tactical advice, like do this, don't do that kind of thing. So we're going to talk initiatives first, and then we'll talk just kind of a list. It is a list of advice, but we'll make it a little more interesting than just rattling off a list of things. So Marty, actually, I was going to bring you in. You had an initiative to avoid 1,000 confined space entries. That was this high, really sort of visible effort at Freeport here in Texas, and it was very successful. If you could tell the story of that initiative.
Yeah, I mean, when we started the robotics program, we really didn't know what direction we were going to go in with it, other than we knew the technology existed. We knew that there was opportunity, in the inspection and maintenance area, but we didn't really have a clear focus. And then soon after that, we said, well, we can eliminate confined space entries, and we can take the safety initiative to help push forward. So we kind of did a little pilot at Freeport. We set an internal goal of eliminating 1,000 CSN. So we fortunately, every confined space entry gets reported to our ES&S group, because it's a hazardous activity, and they have to be prepared if they need to do a rescue or whatever. So we had great data of all the confined space entries that we did in the previous years. So we were able to go through that list and say, yeah, we could do that. We could do that with a pole camera. We could do, we kind of guessed real quick. Yeah, we should be able to knock off 1,000 would be a good goal. And so we had a few platforms from like Inductin and others, Video Array and stuff. Just this was early on when we were just pulling them from other industries. And
what year was it? Was it
that was
2016?
2016. 15-16 time frame. And
it'll be easier to do now for sure.
Yeah. We almost Ineos won. Right before Ineos won. Yeah. We saw that at the show. We bought serial number 2 of Ineos 1.
Wow. Yeah.
One of our vendors got serial number 1. We were mad. Anyway, so we did that, and we hit the ground. We did like road shows. We did like tech conferences, all on the site. I think we counted 19 presentations that year that we did in front of people, just getting the technology out there. And anyway, we knocked out about 1,100 that first trial. So we're like, oh, that's good. And then, of course, leadership's like, okay, now leverage that globally. So that's when we did our base robotic kits, and we bought that similar, what we picked out of that were most successful. Got 5 kits of that and put it in each region around the world, trained them up on it. And one of the biggest success stories is we were in Thailand at our Mautaput site like 2 weeks before their turnaround, and brought them all the technology, and we still couldn't turn on. We had Ineos 1 by that time, but we couldn't turn it on because of regulations. They had to clear it through their FCC equivalent, and then but all the other robots were ready to go, and 2 weeks later they knocked out like 89% of their confined space entries during that turnaround. They were so enthusiastic, and it was really neat because we were doing the training with the techs, but we probably had about 30 engineers in the room too, and they stayed the whole time just to see what was going on and stuff. So that was like, that culture, we built that culture in like a week. It was great. But no, and then from that we got the global initiative. So one way to adopt stuff is to force it, right? Mm-hmm. So we actually got our leadership to say there will be no confined space entries without exception. So the exception had to get signed off by a site leader originally, and if a robot was not used. So that's what really helped accelerate that.
I love the story because you found this ambitious but achievable goal, and it was really visible. You did it in 1 year, and from there you scaled. And so I think there's a model there, especially for larger organizations. It can be really challenging, but if you find one place where you can do one thing and be successful, and then tell that story and scale it, yeah, please.
Yeah, and then we pivoted quick. Sorry, you didn't interrupt. But it was kind of a neat thing, because then we started getting pushback. Well, we have to go in there anyway. I'm sure people have heard that. And
for
then
maintenance, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Why did I bother to do that? So then we got our safety group to swing it to exposure hours. Mm-hmm. So we started tracking exposure hours versus confined space entry. So that way people can still get their brownie points by reducing the amount of time people are in. So that was a new metric that we were able to create.
I think what Marty's basically summarized, the way that I like to talk about this stuff, is that it has to be a top-down and bottom-up approach.
Yep.
It has to be a squeeze to really get good buy-in. So you've got, like you said, top-down, a directive that thou shall, basically, and then you're basically empowering the field level to come up with it, and that is how we've seen successful adoption really take place.
And you've worked with a lot of different companies, a lot of different types of organizations. So you've seen a lot of different ways people are trying to do this. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that is the model that has the most legs. Absolutely. Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense. Matthew, I was going to bring you in because you're doing this big effort right now, and you already alluded to this, to bring awareness to the drone program that you guys have. You're bringing drones into OxyChem, which is new. I mean, you've had the program at Occidental Petroleum for some time. You have a big established program, 8 Part 107 pilots that are full-time, and then 20 folks with Part 107 that could do on-the-spot missions. But at OxyChem, it's all new. So you've been traveling a lot and sort of getting the word out. Can you tell us about the success of that or the challenges, what you've been doing?
Yeah, absolutely. The OxyChem side has been a challenge just trying to get our technology known within the organization itself. Our Oxy Petroleum side is very well established. All of our business units are using drones, daily or weekly at this point. But the OxyChem side, the challenge has just been getting to adopt new technology because they're more of like plant type situations, and so they've been doing it the same way for so long. Why do we need to change? That's the question that you always get. The biggest thing is just showing the value of it. I was just talking about that one site that was just going to go off and buy a drone on their own. I got an email today. It's like, look, we're already saving $10,000 by just using your drone that we already have. So really showing with the capabilities of the technology to kind of an older generation of people, I think, is a huge thing to do.
Yeah, it can all be really abstract until you show up with the piece of equipment and you put it in the air or in the water or on the ground and you demonstrate the data collection it can actually do remotely. Casey, so we have big initiatives, we have big road shows, but then Casey sometimes you just have a use case that's so powerful that it kind of is its own internal marketing campaign built in. And I was going to have you tell the story about you bought I think an M350 and used it for flare stack inspections for 2 days, and it paid for itself in just those 2 days. If you could tell that story.
Yeah, so when I first started at Ineos, they said they were going to hire a subcontractor to come out and do our flare inspections. Well, I knew that we could most likely purchase a drone ourselves, train our API inspectors to do the flare inspection, and we would get an ROI in no time. So what we did is we got quotes to inspect all the flares on site, which we have like 5, and it was like $15,000 each day. And I went to the vendor, and we spec'd out the drone that we wanted, which was the M350, and the guys came. They got trained in like 2 days. Mind you, these guys never flown a drone in their entire lives. They were excited about it because they're young and they're ready to learn. But they did the training. They got certified. Now they're Part 107. And next day they're out doing our flare stacks, and it's just like immediate. We're going out now every week to do our flare stacks because we actually had a problem at that time. So if we wouldn't have purchased that drone, we would have been spending so much more money in that time frame. From that point to our turnaround the next year, we probably went out at least 3 times a week to look at the drone. It was a huge success for us at the site, and now we actually, like you said, procedure, right? So anytime we have a steam event or any type of upset, we actually have to go inspect all of our flares with our drone. So we're up there all the time.
Yeah, so some of the best advice, Zach just mentioned, and also I sat in on the drone responders, one of their sessions this morning, and great advice that I wish I knew 8.5 years ago. The way we started our program, we started the shotgun approach where, hey, we're going to keep everyone on the ground, and we're going to do everything at height that we can with the drone. Luckily, we were successful. We were able to show that within the first 2 years of our program, we saved $7.4 million to the site. What Zach said and what I heard this morning is if you're looking to start your program, just like Casey mentioned, focus on one thing. Focus on one thing, get good at that one thing, and then expand to other things. And also, like she said, get the right drone for the job. 8.5 years ago, the only choices we had were Phantom 4s and Inspire 1s, and let me tell you, they didn't do very good in a refinery environment with the electrical and magnetic interference. It was a lot of growing pains, and luckily it worked out for us, but best advice, focus on one thing at first and get the right drone for the job.
I think so far what I've heard is a lot of kind of prescribed and planned type of drone operations. I think that we've seen a lot of success in taking advantage opportunistically from having the right tools in the right place to satisfy something that emerged and is a little bit pressing.
An emergency. I mean, that was, I think every use case we talked about at the AUVSI panel was one of those, like, we have an emergency, or we just want to know what's going on over there. Yeah.
So I can talk about the one that it comes to mind for us is with a nested drone capability, whether that's third party or internal, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant for this discussion. But being able to respond to something that would have historically taken 24 hours and a lockout, tagout, and a CSE and the whole thing, and a maintenance disruption. So maintenance scheduling disruption as well, which hard to quantify. What that can mean is that ripples through. What are you delaying? What are you postponing? But with having the right people.
In the story you're about to tell, it's like $250,000 an hour that would be lost from downtime?
Correct. Yeah, $250,000 an hour in downtime, and we took that 24 hours and compressed it to 3. So you can do the math on the 21 hours saved pretty quickly. And that shows that value right away. And then to John's point earlier, you take those and you build on it incrementally. But it can be opportunistic. I'll take the second here to talk about turnaround as well, because Marty talked about it can be hard to find the dollars. Turnaround, obviously, time is money. Every hour offline it's somebody can do the math on it, but it's big, right? So finding opportunities within the turnaround window where you're showing the benefit of drones and robotics, and then taking those success stories and then using it in your rhetoric for the day-to-day support is another thing that we've found success in.
Anyone can share a white paper that a company gave you, right? But if you have your own internal data to say, no, look what we did, look at the money we saved, it's a lot more compelling. Marty, you had a really cool story about using a 3D printer to make a marine ROV, because I know we talk a lot about drones, and I mean, I work mainly in the drone industry, but there's other robotics out there. But you made this thing, I think it was 2017.
Yeah, this is early on, one of, like the reaction jobs, right? The E-jobs or whatever you want to call them. Those are always they're the most fun because they're the largest reward, right? Because you can go in and save the day. So somehow our robotics program got notified lately, through awareness of the program or whatever. But they asked if there was a way that we could survey. They were just about to tear into the ground, and they wanted to survey an underwater culvert. It was a seawater inlet, I believe, and concrete tunnel, basically. And they said that, well, they can take it offline, so it was going to be still water, and they could fill with clear water instead of our coastal water that we have here. So they gave us that benefit, but they needed it, and it was, I believe, 1,000 feet, so we had to go. But they said, give us a good sample from both directions, and we'll see what we have. But unfortunately, at the time, we only had the ROV we had only had a front-facing camera, and we needed to inspect that the issue was the ceiling of the tunnel. And so we real quick drew up, 3D printed a little bracket. We had a GoPro in the group, and I brought one of my waterproof flashlights from home, stuck it on there, and made a little bracket because I didn't want to lose any of it in the, they're like, oh, let's just tape it on. Well, like, we're going to be knocking down a concrete culvert. We need it attached, I don't want to lose my flashlight or the GoPro, So we did that, went through, got the footage, and it was in much better condition than they expected. That they put like another 10 years of life onto that culvert, and literally they were going to break ground, and it was a multi-million-dollar project to replace that culvert. So it was
eight-figure. I know you can't say the actual number, but it was a lot of money. They were about to tear this perfectly.
Yeah, like 1,000 feet underground across the plant. So it was a big deal.
So we got into use cases a little bit, and it's hard not to do when we talk robotics because there's so many cool stories like this, and there's the savings and the safety implications are so impressive. But I want to step back and just reframe the reason we're getting into these success stories. You could use them internally for marketing, right? It's not just that you save the money and then maybe you'll get the budget. That's important. But also, can you tell the story in a way that other people hear it? And you can't really you can't buy PR that good internally when it comes to a story that people will want to tell. When you are able to just throw something together and 3D print this piece that saves 8 figures or saving the cost of the equipment you bought in 2 days with the flare stack inspections, saving millions, and using a drone to go find out what's wrong with this hang up. And anyway, so all of these are stories that need to be leveraged. Like, you can have a cool story, but how do you use it, right? And I just want to sort of give that a little framing as we're talking about advice on driving change in company culture. So I think we're going to get into just tactical real quick. Here's the advice, and I really tried to whittle this down because we had a lot of conversations that ranged over a lot of different topics, and I had a lot of content I could have put up here, and it might have been several slides, but this was the advice that when I really synthesized things, and you guys actually haven't seen this, but this all came from you. I want to say on the right, the internal marketing, it could be as simple as just talking to people. It doesn't have to be some big effort. You don't have to hire a social media person, or it could be just that you're determined that you're going to tell the story over and over. So I want to talk internal marketing a little bit and the different things, because I know there's different initiatives in place. So Casey, I want to start with you, because I think when we were talking, you're like, we're not doing that much. And I was like, no, you're doing a lot. So could you tell us what you have going on in terms of internal marketing at Ineos?
Yeah, so we have internal newsletters. So like I said, we have like a safety moment, and we usually put a picture of something that we inspected with one of our drones in there, and talk about reducing the confined spaces and elevated work, stuff like that. We also have a business review and a success story. So each quarter or every other quarter, we'll have a success story. So we talk about all of our success there as well. And then we have a lot of different internal groups, like with our other sites, that we talk about stuff, and we provide solutions to them, or I provide solutions to them. And also, I bring a lot of vendors out for lunch and learns, and I invite our other sites as well. So, Ineos as a whole, O&P, like, in, I guess, Texas, we didn't really have any drones at all, and we weren't really using any advanced NDE. And I guess bringing vendors in to even just have the conversations and figure out what the problems are for our other sites and my site as well has really helped shift that, I guess, perspective and everyone's mindset. So anytime anyone's doing anything, they think of, is there a safer way to do this? Anything as, much as looking at housekeeping. That's pretty simple, right? You can climb up a scaffold, you can climb up a ladder or whatever, take pictures from far away. But during our turnaround, we use that, and then we put it out. We have toolbox talks, during turnaround. You have it every single day. We put it out, all of the pictures out during our toolbox talks. So a lot of different internal marketing that we do.
I love it. Matthew, you touched on what you're doing right now, which is completely internal marketing. Do you have anything to add? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. You've already talked about this, but if you have anything additional that you've seen work really well, or that you'd recommend people do on this topic?
Yeah, I think Cortland mentioned about the up and down approach, the sandwich method. I think it's a good idea to find someone you could consider like a technology champion within like an organization, someone that you see their want to learn more about the technology, and have them also be pushing it from the inside as well. So not just the outside influence, as well as having the internal influence.
That's huge. So identifying that person who might be your point person, and maybe you're even emailing with them to help them share information, and yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
I think one thing that I see maybe not popping out there real clearly is that you need to know what the output needs to be, right? So the hardware does X, but what are you actually producing at the end? I see clear reporting under point 3, but not necessarily understanding who your business unit is and what their output needs to be from the technology, from the change. Because when it comes down to it, every single business unit is still going to need to achieve something with the technology. They're still going to have to satisfy some requirement. So making sure that that's part of the dialogue, so that as you introduce this, you're talking about what that story or what that journey looks like, to ticking the box for that thing that they have to do.
And this touches on something you've said before in these conversations, which is that even if you're internal, you're still an internal service provider. So in some sense, you're a third party. You need to be aware of what your client needs and be a good vendor to that client. So if you're just coming saying, look at all these solutions we have, but you're not speaking their language or understanding their outputs, you may not be they just may just not want to work with you.
Totally possible.
Yeah.
And I'll take the opportunity here to touch on kind of the elephant on the room normally with this type of thing has to do with loss of work, loss of job, right? Everybody who's unsure about this normally has a bit of an apprehension around more drones, more robots are going to take our jobs, take over the world, right? We've all heard something along those lines. So making sure that you have a strategy to discuss what that means. It can be exposure hour reduction. The work still has to be reviewed. It can be, hey, we're getting busier. There's an increasing demand for energy globally. We're just trying to keep everybody here, but do more with the people we have, right? It can be just make sure that there's some intentionality behind that. There's a human factor to the robots.
Yeah, I always use our industrial cleaning as an example. I mean, those guys were in slicker suits down in the sump, and now he's in a little air-conditioned booth with joysticks. I'm like, which do you think he preferred? And I tell the other guys that. I'm like, and if he embraced the technology, he got to operate it. So
Yeah.
So as a emergency responder, we have a saying, don't waste a good disaster. So the first 2 years of my program, we had Hurricane Harvey, we had the ITC fire, and then towards the end of that second year, we had the whole Shell Oil management group here in Houston, where we were able to take the vice president of HSSE, take her outside, do a live stream with the drone that was being pushed back into the room, the conference room that they were doing, and we were doing a Q&A back and forth. And at the end of that Q&A, that VP said, hey, if you don't have a drone program, get one, and if you need help, call Deer Park. Hurricane Harvey, we did stuff with the drones. We got to access the place that were flooded, from the Houston Ship Channel, probably invaded a good 1/10 of a mile of our northern property. We were able to get the drone in there and identify turned over frac tanks, flooded vac trucks, just different issues that the emergency response team needed to start planning for to go take care of. One flight, we were able to identify 4 roofs that had sunk. When we were getting post-disaster, we did 273 fin fans in 2 days. So we were able to check the box on the pre-startup process safety review. By a day and a half, we flew all of them. They gave us a list of 50 that they wanted a closer look at. We did those 50 in the morning. By that afternoon of day 2, that box was checked. And that saved an enormous amount of money for the site, which usually would have been scaffolding, manned lifts, and all kinds of good stuff like that. So when you have the attention of the site, your company, take it.
Thanks, John. I want to shift gears and talk about this adoption topic. What do you buy the tools and train internally? Do you hire a service provider like Cortland, or do you do some hybrid approach? We have about 15 minutes, and then we'll do 10 minutes for the Q&A. So just a quick time check on that. So I want to dive in. I know I've heard a lot of really good advice from all of you about how to navigate this, and I think the first piece of advice up here, know your data needs before choosing tools, is a good first principle for navigating, well, what are you going to buy versus outsource? And I think actually Casey's example with the flare stacks, well, we have this obvious ROI use case, right? We are going to buy that drone and do this work with that drone. And I don't think that was your first robotics equipment that you guys have bought, but it's just an example of something. But let's dive in. How do you guys navigate this question? And Casey, can we start with you of what you do internally versus externally? And I know, for example, there's some things you outsource, like ROV work, which you only need annually for like a regulated inspection, and some things you want on site because you might need them for an emergency or a sudden incident that pops up.
Yep, I think you answered your own question.
Oh gosh.
So it's, everyone wants everything right now, and either that's you guys as service providers or our internal clients, essentially. Everyone wants everything right now. So if you have something that needs to be done right now, then you're going to get the tool for that. So ease of use, convenience, so like, your external drone, internal drone, and then how many times are you going to use it? Is it just for like an annual compliance, like you said? Is it for a special inspection? Are you going in underground in a pipe that you're going to do one time in 50 years? Then you're obviously not going to purchase that drone. And then, as far as like drones are easy to talk about, but then you talk about crawlers and other advanced NDE methods attached to robotics. That's something that we would outsource as well, because just specifically our site, we have APIs for Ineos, and then we have our nested NDE techs, but for anything like above like a level 2, we're gonna have outsourced. So anything that we're already doing as far as like certification wise or specialty wise, we would definitely outsource that.
Cortland, at Osprey, you advise companies who are trying to build their own program, but also might need to outsource and going some kind of. I think honestly, everyone's doing hybrid. We talk about, do you go internal, external? I've never heard of a company saying we're just doing one or the other, because there's just going to be use cases like Casey's just said, where you
both.
just are going to hire it out. But yeah, if you could share some advice on helping people navigate this and probably different phases of navigating that.
Yeah, I think number 3 on the screen, it comes down to that, right? Just vetting those long-term. It's a long-term relationship. A good long-term partner won't be scared and try to say everything should be contracted, right? Like this is a journey where the market and the use cases are only expanding, right? So the more that Matt excels with their program, John, Casey, and Marty, like everybody does well, then the whole industry excels together. So what do we as a service provider have to be scared of? More possibility, more use, more adoption, right? So as far as going one way or the other, I mean, it comes down to level of readiness, I think, right? I do agree that most times it is a hybrid or some level of blended approach, whether that's 595 or 95.5, right? It doesn't necessarily matter, or anywhere in between, but it'll come down to that level of readiness. And that can shift, right? So that'll just shift, and it could go one way or the other as technology changes, as internal policies change. You could end up with a new CEO that doesn't like technology. We're going back to...
Or you can get divested.
Yeah, exactly. John's a great example right in the middle. Yeah, sorry, man.
Sorry, John.
He's going to keep trying, though. He's not going to give up.
Oh, that's right. And that was your advice. I mean, I asked John, like, well, what do you do? What do you do when you're facing internal culture that's just really sort of stacked against you?
Yeah, so, it went from, everyone coming to me, even the corporate people coming to me. Now I'm knocking on doors, telling everyone, yes, we still have the same program that we had, when we were Shell, same stuff, same pilots, great program. Get embedded with your project and your maintenance groups. Anytime you hear a new project popping up, tell them, hey, this is the capabilities I have. Any type of inspections come up, what we say, we should be checking the box on the drone before we put anyone up in the air. We should use the drone to its fullest potential until it's time for time on tools. So it's biggest advice I can take, and someone even mentioned it back to me when I said it, at this yesterday. Hey, that's great advice. Get involved with your maintenance and your project groups. So when you hear something's coming up, you can step in and say, hey, we can do this. And we can do it, as I've already said, a lot cheaper.
And even, just to expand on that, even if you don't get divested, there's still turnover in the companies. People get promoted, and you say, oh, you didn't build the culture. Well, you have built the culture, but it's still not taught before they come to Dow or whoever. They're unless their mentor or their education used robotic platforms, it's still not in their in their culture. And so you have to constantly reiterate and do new road shows and speak and talk, and just don't assume that it's all there and everybody knows everything, because they'll come to this day. They come and we have drones, the drone program. I'm like, where have you been? But no, you need to educate continuously, and then eventually, we're working also with the Workforce of Tomorrow and other initiatives from other organizations to try to get this culture out, and we're still trying to get robots into Brazos Sport College that trains a lot of our operators and techs and stuff. But it's more than just in your company, so you need to push. And like you were saying, with the vendors, I wanted to add, work with the vendors and your nested contractors. You don't have to do everything internal, and if it's good for you, it's usually good for them too. So if you're work out a plan, make it productive for them and for you.
So I think we have time. I'm curious just to have everyone describe sort of the organization of your drone programs, because I was interested to hear how they're all a little different. But before we do that, I want to make sure if there is more advice to share. Do you guys think we've exhausted it? Do you have just more tips and tricks? Any other advice on, you know, whether it's about changing culture, whether it's about navigating adoption? If you're just getting started, what would you do first?
So I want to expand a little bit more on number 2, where it says go for safety or ROI. Those work hand in hand. Once you're talking about safety, keeping people on the ground, saving rental costs on scaffold, man lifts, cranes, whatnot, by doing it safely, you're automatically saving dollars. Put those two together, you know, it's a win-win. Not say one or the other, it's both of them.
Yeah, a funny anecdote on that. One of our early logos for our robotics group had safety aspects and drones and robots and everything in it. And one of the VP of manufacturing at the time, who was a big proponent to robotics, he's like, "You're missing something in that logo." I'm like, "What?" He's all, "The dollar signs."
The money.
Because if there isn't the dollar signs in there, it's not going to ever happen.
Yes, please.
I was just going to say, the start small is a big part. Like, even at Oxy, our whole program got started from just one cheap drone with one small problem, and the solution was the drone. Yeah. So, you know, safety and ROI, I think, you know, you can have ROI from your safety as well. So focus on the safety, because all of our companies respond to being more safe. So don't always just focus on the money aspect of it.
For sure. And I love, and you hear that. It's just a guy who liked flying drones brought the drone in one day and got some data, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, look, you could do that again?" And it just was whatever drone they had at home. There's a power in just doing anything at all, right? And like taking that first step and showing people what robotics can accomplish. So I think I was really interested to hear everyone has a slightly different model and how they train their pilots, where their pilots operate from. Whether they stay, you know, they're a corporate team or they're local or a mix of both. And I think my bigger takeaway, we're about to, you know, share these models, but there's all kinds of ways to do this. And I think that can also be crazy making, because you're like, what do I do today? But it's powerful also to know if you just dive in and get started, I think you'll feel your way forward. And there's a lot of people out in front who are really gracious and helpful and willing to give advice. And so there is a path to follow. You might have to make it yourself, but there's a lot of people who've already done it. So Matthew, that being said, let's just go down the line and describe how you guys do it at Oxy.
Yeah, at Oxy, we've chosen to go the corporate route. We have 8 full-time pilots with 20+ field pilots is what we call them, all with access to different types of drones. From the corporate route, we're almost a third-party service provider just internally to any of our business units, whoever may have a use for any type of different drone. We're also embedded within our aviation program, so we also get the safety and kind of the maintenance standards that come with like commercial aviation as well, so it helps us to maintain a very high safety priority within our organization.
Thanks, Matthew.
Yeah, so I had that, but now I'm a one-man show.
Easy,
So I'm the only full-time pilot we have. I have 6 other volunteers that I use as needed. We have 6 drones. We do internal inspections. We have OGI camera. You know, we do different stuff like that. I would like to do everything in-house, but I know my limitations. You know, just like Casey said, you're not going to buy the multi-$100,000, $200,000 drone to use it once a year. So we do have, on select cases, and as I mentioned on the mapping, we do bring in third parties, but they're thoroughly vetted before they're just cut loose on the site.
Thanks, John.
Yep, similar approach. We have 5 pilots at my site, and then a handful at each of our sites throughout, I guess, Houston area. And we do everything directly from the site specific. We don't really have a very super structured, probably as much as Dow has or PMX, but we just started, you know, like a year ago. So like, you know, Zach said, just start eating the elephant. And you have people like MFE. I mean, you have so many people and so much knowledge out there. Anyone would be willing to help you start your program and just ask the questions.
And Casey, I want to toot your horn because when you came in, I think you told me rope access was the most advanced NDE method that you guys were using, and now you've really built a pretty sophisticated program. So it's pretty impressive what you've done in a short period.
Yeah, and it took us 10 years to get rope access.
Yeah, we still consider rope access as innovative.
Fair enough. Marty, if you could describe.
But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of different models work, and I think not the same thing will work for everybody, especially in different regions around the world and even around the country. Ours happened out of necessity because when the FAA banned commercial flights, you had to have pilots. The only way we can get our 333 exemption was to have pilots in a school affiliation. So we used LSU and our local pilots to get that 333. And then, that started the program, and it was a service, that was part of our corporate aviation, which was just a pure overhead organization anyway. So we never really challenged that because it just stayed as overhead. So it wasn't a per use cost to any of the plants. So it really helped accelerate the use of drones because it really didn't cost any more money to any plant. And the downside to that was there was just this order that all drones had to be flown by corporate aviation. There was no exception. And that worked for a number of years, but then it started becoming difficult with like internal flights. Mm-hmm. And I even argued, ROVs have propellers on them and stuff. Are those? No, we're not doing ROVs, so we're like, well, where do you go? And, some stuff you need certain skill sets, especially on internal flying. We learned that quickly that, people that were familiar with the assets were better pilots than someone that had never been to that site before. And then when we get into the expensive platforms, that wouldn't necessarily make sense for just one site to own. Mm-hmm. You really need to leverage that on a service provider because they can use it with other customers. So we had to add that flexibility, and there were some internal battles on that in politics, but it cleared up. But in all said, we have a robust internal program. We have a robust qualification for our vendors, and we also use those guidelines globally because of the rest of the world we use service providers. So I think it worked out well.
Thanks, Marty. Cortland, I skipped you, and that's because you're not an end user, but you work with a ton of end users. So I'm just curious if you've seen some models on how people build their drone programs that you think are more successful than others, or I'm just curious.
No, yeah. I think anything can be successful provided it gets the attention it deserves. Yeah. Right. What I was going to say as far as it's not just buying equipment and absolutely going for it. Yeah. Right. There are other pieces in terms of standing up a successful program that go beyond the hardware side. So making sure that you wrap your head, ask questions, find a mentor, find a consultant, talk to somebody about it, and wrap your head around that if you're just getting going on it, and take that part seriously, right? So just if you do that, then when the program is stood up, it will start to excel, and do so with less fires, less headaches, which of course is always a good indicator of a fairly successful program. I think I would pretty much leave it at that. Yep.
Thank you. So we're going to go to questions now. So do we have any questions in the audience? Yes, sir.
I need a mic or?
Inbound.
Oh, nice. Thank you. My question's about aggregating the value creation opportunity of all the use cases. So you guys, every one of you, probably more than once over the past hour, talked about individual use cases that had cost savings or in some cases, pretty massive value creation for your company. We're working with a large refining and petrochemical company that's looking at doing this on a corporate scale, on an enterprise-wide scale. And in order to get the buy-in from leadership, we have to calculate what the total value creation opportunity is aggregated across all the different use cases. And I guess what I'm wondering is, have any of you guys done this already, or what would you suggest for going about getting your arms around, all the value creation potential?
Yeah, that's the difficult task. It's no easy task, right? Trying to figure out the evaluation, especially when your cost saving starts exceeding your maintenance budget, and you get questions like, well, how does that work? But it does, and there's logic behind it. So I think we were fortunate able just to pass a red face test initially. We just made gross estimates on what the savings would be. We tried to focus, rather than trying to figure the overall site and lost opportunity in production, we didn't even take that into account. We just looked at direct cost savings. Okay. And that way it was easier to justify. And the numbers come in very quickly. You'd be amazed on how well that comes. But I think a lot of times we had to talk to the planners, we had to talk to the engineer requesting the service, look it up. They have to look it up in SAP. For me to go find that particular job in the past would be impossible. So you really just have to take the time to go to those requesters and say, hey, do you mind? In order for us to do this again, we need to know what what the savings were. And plus you can put that on your goals for this year, your accomplishments for this year. So we had pretty good feedback on that, but we created it basically, it was like an innovation saving tool, and we had it separated into different categories. We had robotics, we had drones as a separate, and we had industrial cleaning and even rope access, and tracked all that. And we let each department use it however they wanted that data. We just made it available.
These guys are looking at it as a corporate value creation opportunity, and they've defined the different stakeholders from safety, operations, maintenance, reliability, and so on. Looks like about a half dozen to a dozen stakeholders, and are trying to get their arms around. They haven't done this yet, really, only at a micro scale. Sounds like some of you guys have done this at a corporate scale, and some, on a big scale in the plants. I'm just wondering, how would you go about getting from all the stakeholders for all the different use cases, getting that data?
It comes back down to a relationship. Like, it really is relationship based. You are going to have to come with an educational piece, because the reality is, as much as you might have those, we're going to call them, key people, as those 6 or 12 stakeholders that you've identified, they might not know the nitty gritty of how those specific scopes of work, if they were done in traditional ways, would compare to how it's being done with robotics. So you will need to go down further into kind of the field level and be prepared to explain to the people that have that information for a detailed workflow what the initiative is, and go back to that human element where you're not trying to take their job.
And if you're trying to do this externally, you don't have access to those people or numbers. That just makes your task more difficult. But there are people have put together this data in the industry to help at least guide you along those ways. I know people publish stuff.
Yeah, that would help. We're actually working both externally and internally, guided by the corporate leaders. They want to do this. They just want to justify it financially.
I have a question, and you may have already asked this question to them, but have you asked them, what's their top safety problem at all of their sites? Right now it's dropped objects, right? It's huge right now, industry-wide. Everyone wants to, mitigate, remove all dropped objects. So we're doing, at my site specifically, we're doing 17 different initiatives to reduce dropped objects. And a lot of those are solved by drones or by rope access or by, robotics. Have you asked that question?
No, but I'm about to.
It might save everyone a lot of work.
Thank you. Really good. And this was a great session. I wish I'd have had it recorded. This was really good.
Appreciate that.
And feel free to see me afterwards. I can give you a name of somebody that collects a lot of this data. So.
Man, that's great. Thank you.
Other questions? That was a great one. Yes.
Yeah, thanks. A great session already, and thanks for sharing the best practices or kind of lessons learned. I think it was Trey yesterday, one of the round tables from Chevron, also kind of highlighted kind of the best practices, also highlight the limitations. Don't promise the world, because is that valid? Have you guys any use cases? Can you share something on that?
I think I mentioned it earlier today. It's just everybody has a horror story around somebody promised everything. John kind of touched on it with, we can model the plant, and then he gets called in off the bench, right? So don't overpromise. You have to do your homework. Find good manufacturers, find good distributors to work with as well, because the honesty is a trickle-down effect. If you're playing a game of telephone, you're already screwed. So it's got to start there, and that's got to go forward into the business unit.
And I think that's a great point that you made, because everyone's scared of failure, right? But if you're transparent with your company and with your key stakeholders all throughout the process and telling, hey, you know what, this is brand new, of course, build the confidence first. Make sure that you solve a problem, do that first. But once you get everyone asking the questions, just be transparent. Say, this is new. this may solve the problem, it may not, but essentially this is what it's supposed to do. Let's try it. If you're comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with it. Let's talk about it throughout the process. I kind of shared, my failure, not really my failure, but it was a problem, and I was transparent with all of the stakeholders throughout that process, so no one had any growing pains or frustration afterwards. We weren't frustrated with ourselves, and it didn't pull my company's culture back. It just kept us like, okay, you know what? There's always going to be one bad egg in the box. So.
Other questions? Anybody? Okay. We don't need to stay up here. We got 2 more minutes on the clock, so I think we're good. We'll give you guys those 2 minutes. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you.
But please thank our panelists. Yeah, thank you guys so much. Thank you very much.
Great panel. Thank you so much. And further questions will be at the reception, Bots and Brews, which is going on downstairs. So this is your last panel up here, so we can go into Q&A in an informal style over Bots and Brews. Thank y'all so much.
And then Mahoney's later tonight is where the after party is. Don't forget.